It started with a pen, a simple, ordinary pen, the kind that costs less than $1 and slides forgotten into jacket pockets, the kind no one ever notices until it isn't there. Marcus Hale had been reaching across the white linen tablecloth at Carver's, one of the most expensive restaurants in the city, when it rolled off the edge and disappeared beneath the table. He didn't think anything of it. He bent forward, reached down, and in that one unremarkable second, the entire architecture of his life cracked open. What he saw made his blood go cold. There, beneath the pristine tablecloth, his wife Diana's ankle was pressed intimately against the ankle of the man sitting directly across from Marcus. Not the accidental brush of strangers sharing a tight space, not the careless overlap of people too focused on their food. But this was deliberate. Her heel was hooked around his calf, her leg slowly tracing an unmistakable movement, a wordless language shared between two people who had forgotten, or simply stopped caring, that the man who paid for the apartment they slept in every night was sitting less than 3 feet away. The man was Garrett Voss, Marcus's business partner of 6 years. Marcus straightened slowly. He picked up the pen. He set it on the table. He looked at the bread basket, and then at his water glass, and then at the centerpiece, a small arrangement of white orchids that the restaurant replaced every morning. He did not look at Diana. He did not look at Garrett. The conversation continued around him, something about the Meridian account, something about Q3 projection. And Marcus nodded at what seemed like appropriate intervals, because the professional, composed part of his brain was still running on autopilot, while the rest of him sat very, very still, like a man who had just stepped onto ice and was trying to determine exactly how thin it was. He didn't say a word. He would not say a word for a long time, but something had been set in motion. To understand what happened next, you have to understand what Marcus's life had actually been for the past 8 years. He had met Diana Carrington at a fundraiser for a children's hospital, the kind of event where people spent thousands of dollars on tickets to feel virtuous for an evening. Marcus had been there as the guest of a college friend. Diana had been there because her mother, Eleanor Carrington, sat on the hospital's board of directors and required her daughter's attendance as a matter of family presentation. Diana was stunning in the way that people who have never worried about money often are, polished and at ease, moving through the room like she owned it. She had laughed at something Marcus said, genuinely laughed, and for a moment he had seen something real in her, something that existed beneath the careful grooming and the practiced charm. He had fallen in love with that real thing. The tragedy was that it had mostly been an illusion. The Carrington family had old money, the kind that had survived several generations of stock market downturns and bad investments simply through the inertia of its original mass. Eleanor presided over it with the iron certainty of someone who believed wealth was a moral quality, a proof of character, evidence of God's approval. Diana's brother Preston shared this worldview completely. He drove cars that cost as much as houses and referred to people who didn't recognize his father's name as civilians. He had never, in Marcus's memory, said a single kind word to him. The Carringtons had tolerated Marcus because Diana had wanted him, and Diana's wants were generally indulged, but toleration was the most they had ever offered. From the very first Sunday dinner at the Carrington estate, Eleanor had made the terms of Marcus's acceptance clear through 100 small cruelties. She commented on his suit. She mispronounced his surname with a smile that dared him to correct her. She spoke to Diana about their future in ways that excluded Marcus from the frame, discussing vacation homes he would never be asked about and family trusts he would never see. Preston had been worse in a more direct way. He called Marcus the consultant at family gatherings, always with that particular brand of amusement that is designed to look like a joke while landing like a slap. He questioned Marcus's business decisions at dinner tables and cut him off mid-sentence, and once, at a Christmas party with 30 people present, loudly asked Diana how much longer she planned to play house before she got serious about her future. Diana had laughed it off. Marcus had smiled and refilled his glass and excused himself to the bathroom, where he stood for 2 minutes, gripping the edge of a marble sink before going back out. He had swallowed all of it. He was a patient man by nature, and he had told himself, out year after year, that Diana loved him, that the rest of it was just noise, the static of a particular kind of class anxiety that he didn't have to share or internalize. He had built his career methodically, working his way into a partnership at Voss and Hale Financial Consulting, the firm he had co-founded with Garrett 6 years ago. He was good at his work. He was careful, thorough, and trustworthy. He had believed Garrett was the same. 2 weeks after the lunch at Carver's, Marcus sat across from his older brother Daniel in the cramped but comfortable kitchen of Daniel's house in the suburbs. The Sunday afternoon light came in through yellow curtains. Daniel's wife, Teresa, was somewhere in the back of the house with the kids. Marcus had his hands wrapped around a mug of coffee he hadn't touched, and he told his brother everything. The pen, the ankle, the careful performance he had maintained for 2 weeks while he decided what to do. Daniel listened without interrupting. When Marcus finished, Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "What do you want to happen?" Daniel finally said. "I want to understand the full picture before I do anything," Marcus said. "I want to know exactly what I'm dealing with, all of it." Daniel nodded. He had a friend, he said, a woman named Claudia Rennick, who had been a forensic accountant before she became a private investigator. She was discreet, professional, and extraordinarily thorough. If there was a full picture to find, Claudia would find it. Marcus said yes. He drove home to the apartment he shared with Diana, and he made dinner, and he listened to her talk about a friend's renovation project, and he told her the salmon was good, which it was, and he felt the strange, cold clarity of a man who has made a decision and is simply waiting for the machinery of that decision to do its work. 3 weeks later, Claudia Rennick placed a folder on the table in front of Marcus. She sat across from him in a coffee shop downtown. The folder was not thick. It did not need to be. What was inside it was precise and economical, the way real damage often is. Diana and Garrett had been involved for 14 months. Claudia had photographs, time-stamped and unambiguous. She had hotel records, a trail of bookings going back over a year, the kind of careful, recurring pattern that spoke not of passion, but of management, of a sustained and deliberate arrangement. She had also, because she was extraordinarily thorough, looked at the financial side of things. Your business partner," Claudia said quietly, "has been siphoning money from the firm's operating accounts for approximately 8 months. It started small. It accelerated. He's moved it through 3 shell accounts." Marcus looked at the figures. He looked at them for a long time. "How much?" he said. "Approximately $430,000, Claudia said. The number sat in the air between them. Marcus did not react dramatically. He turned the page. He read the summary of Claudia's findings with the steady attention of a man reviewing a contract. When he reached the last page, he closed the folder and folded his hands on top of it. "Thank you," he said. He meant it completely. He drove from the coffee shop to his firm's offices, where he stayed until well past midnight, reviewing 5 years of account records with the specific, targeted knowledge of exactly what he was looking for. By 2 in the morning, he had confirmed everything Claudia had found and added 12 more instances she had not. The full figure was closer to $560,000. He photographed every relevant page. He organized the documentation in a format that any competent attorney could work with immediately. Then he drove home, parked in the underground garage, and sat in the dark for a while before going upstairs. Diana was asleep when he came in. He showered quietly and got into bed and stared at the ceiling. In the morning, he would call a lawyer. In the morning, things would begin to move. He had been patient for 8 years. He could be patient for a little longer. The lawyer's name was Raymond Cross, and he came recommended by the kind of people who only recommended professionals they would trust with their own worst crises. He was a compact, unhurried man in his mid-50s with silver hair and the particular stillness of someone who had spent decades in rooms where panic was contagious and had chosen, professionally, never to catch it. Marcus sat across from Raymond in a corner office on the 14th floor of a building that looked out over the river. He had brought 2 copies of everything, organized into labeled sections. Raymond went through the documents with methodical care, occasionally making a small notation in the margin of his own notepad. When he finished, he set down his pen and looked at Marcus with clear, assessing eyes. "You've done most of my job for me," Raymond said. "Oh, this is unusually clean documentation." "I work in finance," Marcus said. "I know what a paper trail looks like." Raymond nodded slowly. "You understand the divorce will be straightforward. The infidelity is documented. The financial fraud committed by your partner is a separate criminal matter, though the timing creates a certain narrative coherence that a jury would find compelling." He paused. "What do you want the outcome to look like?" Marcus had thought about this question for weeks. He had turned it over in his mind during commutes, during meetings where Garrett sat across from him and smiled his easy smile, during dinners where Diana asked about his day with the practiced warmth of someone performing a role. He had considered anger, he had moved through it and come out the other side. "I want what's mine," Marcus said. Nothing more, but every last bit of it." Raymond smiled, a small, controlled expression that suggested satisfaction. "Then let's begin." What happened over the following 6 weeks was not dramatic. That was the point. Drama, Marcus had decided, was for people who were improvising. He was not improvising. The first motion Raymond filed was a petition for divorce on grounds of adultery, supported by the photographic and documentary evidence Claudia had compiled. It was filed on a Tuesday morning without warning or fanfare. Diana received the certified notification by courier at 11:45 that same day. Marcus was in a client meeting when she called. He let it go to voicemail. He let the next 4 calls go to voicemail as well. He finished the meeting, thanked the clients, walked them to the elevator, returned to his office, and closed the door. Then he sat down and listened to 4 messages of escalating disbelief, beginning with cold fury and ending in something that sounded uncomfortably like genuine confusion, as though Diana had never seriously considered the possibility that her choices might produce consequences. The 5th call came from Eleanor Carrington. He did not listen to that message until the following morning. Eleanor's voice on the recording was precise and controlled in a way that barely concealed the volcanic pressure behind it. She informed Marcus that he was making a catastrophic mistake. She informed him that Diana was her daughter and that the Carrington family did not engage in public legal proceedings like common people, and that whatever grievance Marcus imagined he had could be resolved privately and quietly, like civilized adults. She then said, with the particular cruelty of someone who believed they held all the cards, that Marcus should think very carefully about what he stood to lose before he proceeded any further. Marcus deleted the message. He thought it was the last time Eleanor Carrington would underestimate him. He was wrong about that, but only in terms of timing. The second motion Raymond filed, 3 days after the divorce petition, was a complaint of criminal fraud submitted jointly to the State Financial Regulatory Authority and the District Attorney's Office, but he's supported by $560,000 worth of forensically documented evidence. The complaint named Garrett Voss as the sole responsible party, with supporting documentation identifying the 3 shell accounts and the precise mechanism by which funds had been diverted from Voss and Hale's operating capital. The regulatory authority moved faster than Marcus had expected. Garrett received notice of a formal audit on a Friday afternoon. By Friday evening, Marcus had received a call from the firm's junior partner, a careful, decent young man named Paul, who said only that Garrett had left the office abruptly and that there appeared to be something serious happening, and that he thought Marcus should know. Marcus thanked him calmly and said he was aware of the situation. It was, he knew, only the first domino, but the second fell the following Monday. Garrett had apparently spent the weekend in what Claudia, who was still monitoring certain communications at Marcus's request, described as a state of escalating panic. He had made 11 calls to a criminal defense attorney. He had transferred the remaining contents of one of the shell accounts, apparently not understanding that this transfer itself constituted additional evidence of the fraud. He had also, in what Marcus would later describe to Daniel as the most revealing moment in the entire sequence of events, called Diana. Marcus knew about this call because Diana mentioned it at dinner that Monday night in a roundabout way that was clearly designed to extract information. "Garrett reached out to me over the weekend," she said, watching him carefully over the rim of her wine glass. He seemed very upset about something at the firm." "Firms go through difficult periods," Marcus said. He passed her the salad. Diana set down her glass. "Marcus, what is happening?" "A lot of things," he said pleasantly. "Eat your dinner." She stared at him for a long moment. He had changed, she realized. He had been changing for weeks, and she had not noticed because she had not been paying attention, which was, he thought, part of a larger pattern. The Marcus she had married was gentle and accommodating and carefully unobtrusive. This Marcus looked at her with the steady, opaque patience of someone who has already made all his decisions and is simply watching events confirm them. She put down her fork. "I want to talk about the divorce petition." "My attorney handles all communications about the petition," Marcus said. "Raymond's number is in the paperwork you received." "Marcus, I think we should—" "Eat your dinner, Diana," he said, not unkindly. She did not eat her dinner, but she did not say anything else either. The regulatory audit of Voss and Hale was completed with unusual speed, partly because the documentation Marcus had provided was so comprehensive that the auditors spent most of their time confirming rather than investigating. The formal finding was issued on a Thursday. The finding confirmed financial fraud totaling $562,000, attributable solely to Garrett Voss. The following Monday, the district attorney's office filed criminal charges. Garrett's attorney issued a statement calling the charges premature and aggressively one-sided. The statement did not address the documentation. Preston Carrington called Marcus the next day. This was unexpected. Preston never called Marcus. He considered calling Marcus beneath him, but the divorce was now a matter of public record, and the fraud case had attracted a small amount of financial press coverage because Voss and Hale managed portfolios for several prominent families, and Preston had apparently decided that the situation required his direct intervention. "I'm going to be very straightforward with you," Preston said, in the tone of a man who has never in his life been straightforward. "Please do," Marcus said. "You're embarrassing Diana. You're embarrassing our family. This business with your partner is messy and public, and our name is being mentioned in the same breath as a fraud investigation, which is unacceptable. Your family's name appears nowhere in the fraud investigation, Marcus said. I made certain of that. A brief silence. Whatever your grievances are, Preston said, pivoting, there are better ways to handle a marriage that isn't working. I agree, Marcus said. I'm using them. Marcus? Preston's voice dropped into a register that was meant to convey gravity and authority. Think about what you're doing. Diana could have had anyone. She chose you. My family accepted you. Do you understand what that means? Do you have any idea what you're throwing away? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Outside his office window, the city moved in its ordinary afternoon way. Cars and pedestrians, and the ordinary commerce of people going about their lives. I appreciate the call, Preston, he said. Have a good afternoon. He hung up. The divorce proceedings moved through the legal machinery with the steady, impersonal efficiency of a well-prepared case. Diana's attorney was competent and initially confident, arriving at the first mediation session with the energy of someone who expected to negotiate from a position of strength. That confidence had notably diminished by the second session when Raymond laid out the full scope of the documentation. By the third session, Diana's attorney was advising settlement. Diana was furious. She did not want to settle. She wanted, Marcus sensed, a confrontation, a scene in which she could position herself as wronged and martyred and ultimately magnanimous, the kind of marital dissolution that would play well at dinner parties. What she got instead was Raymond Cross presenting 47 pages of time-stamped photographic evidence and hotel records and a forensic accounting of marital assets and the cold arithmetic of what a trial would look like versus what an equitable settlement offered. She settled. The settlement was fair and nothing more than fair, which was exactly what Raymond had engineered it to be. Marcus received his half of their shared assets, the full ownership of his stake in the firm, and the apartment, since the apartment had been purchased with capital that was traceable exclusively to Marcus's own income. Diana received a cash settlement and her personal property, and the knowledge, which Raymond communicated in a single precise sentence at the final signing, that the documentation supporting a contested trial remained archived and available should there ever be any reason to revisit the matter. Diana signed without speaking. She did not look at Marcus when she left the room. Eleanor Carrington issued a statement through the family's publicist to the effect that Diana was moving forward with grace and strength, and that the family wished Marcus well in his future endeavors. The statement was so obviously and completely false in every particular that it functioned almost as a kind of art. Marcus was not thinking about Eleanor's statement. He was thinking about a phone call he had received 3 days earlier from Raymond, who had been quietly pursuing a secondary matter that Marcus had asked him to look into 6 weeks ago, almost as an afterthought. It's a question that had occurred to him late one night while he was reviewing the marital asset documentation. The question was this: what, precisely, did the Carrington family's financial portfolio actually look like? Because Marcus worked in finance. And in 8 years of Sunday dinners and family holidays and overheard conversations and the occasional glimpse of documents that people assumed he wasn't paying attention to, he had noticed certain things. A vacation property that had been mentioned in passing 3 years ago was never mentioned again. Preston's confident announcements about new investment opportunities had a quality, when Marcus thought about them carefully, of a man describing what he intended to do rather than what he had done. The estate itself, the grand Carrington house on the hill that Eleanor treated as proof of dynastic permanence, had not, as far as Marcus could determine, seen any significant maintenance investment in at least 4 years. Raymond's secondary inquiry had been discreet and thorough. What it revealed was more comprehensive than Marcus had expected. The Carrington fortune, as it turned out, was performing an impressive and extremely precarious act of levitation. The estate was mortgaged to 70% of its assessed value. The assessed value itself had been inflated in a report commissioned by the family from a firm that Raymond noted with professional dryness had subsequently lost its licensing in 2 states. Preston's investment fund, the vehicle he used to present himself as a serious financial operator, held assets worth approximately a third of what he claimed in his promotional materials. 3 of the fund's largest supposed investors were, on closer examination, entities that traced back to Preston himself. Eleanor's personal portfolio, which she had always presented as a legacy of her late husband's prudence, had been liquidated almost entirely over the past 5 years, apparently to service the estate's mortgage payments. The Carringtons were not wealthy. They were performing wealth, and the performance was nearly over. Raymond had delivered this information with the careful neutrality of a professional who understood that the information was significant but wished to let his client determine its significance. Marcus had listened. He had thanked Raymond. He had sat alone in his office for a long while afterward, thinking. And he had not liked the Carringtons. He had spent 8 years absorbing their contempt, their condescension, their casual and systematic cruelty. He had watched Eleanor dismiss him at 100 tables and listened to Preston's gleeful, targeted mockery and absorb Diana's comfortable assumption that his function in their marriage was to provide stability while she orbited a more glamorous center of gravity. He had not liked them, but he had not, until this moment, understood the specific and terrible irony of what had been done to him. Eleanor had made her daughter's marriage to Marcus a project of tolerant condescension, endured because Diana wanted it, accepted because what choice did they have? She had positioned it consistently as a concession, a gracious lowering of standards, or a gift of inclusion bestowed upon a man who should have been grateful. And all the while, the fortune that justified this hierarchy, the wealth that made Eleanor's contempt feel like it had structural support, had been quietly, steadily disappearing. They had treated him like a lesser person. They had done it from a position of completely fabricated superiority. And they had never for a single moment imagined that he might one day be in a position to do anything about it. Marcus thought about this for a long time. Then he called Raymond back. "The estate's primary mortgage," he said. "Who holds it?" Raymond told him. It was a regional lending institution, not a major national bank, not a sophisticated financial entity, but just a regional lender that had extended credit to a family name without doing adequate due diligence on the underlying assets. "Is that mortgage on the secondary market?" Marcus asked. Raymond said he would check. It was. Most mortgages end up on the secondary market eventually, bundled and sold as financial instruments to investors who have no particular interest in the original borrower and every interest in the yield. The Carrington estate mortgage had been sold twice and currently resided in a small portfolio managed by a private investment firm. Marcus made an offer on the portfolio. He did not make the offer personally. He made it through an entity that Raymond helped him establish, a holding company with a clean and uninteresting name represented in all negotiations by Raymond himself. The private investment firm, which had no reason to connect the transaction to the Carrington family drama or to the unremarkable financial consultant named Marcus Hale, accepted the offer. It was, in the totality of things, not even a particularly large sum. The portfolio had been slightly underperforming. The firm was happy to have the liquidity. Marcus was now the holder of the mortgage on the Carrington estate. He told no one. He went about his days. He worked. He oversaw the restructuring of Voss and Hale, which Raymond had guided him through legally, allowing Marcus to acquire Garrett's stake through a process that the court had facilitated as part of the fraud resolution. The firm was now his entirely. He renamed it Hale Advisory Group. He promoted Paul to junior partner. He hired 2 new analysts. He rebuilt quietly, and he waited. He did not wait long. When the Carrington Estates mortgage had missed its last 2 payments before Marcus acquired it. In the normal course of things, a lending institution would send notices, issue a formal default warning, and begin the process of foreclosure negotiations, a process that was slow and bureaucratic and gave the borrower significant time to maneuver. Marcus was not a bureaucratic institution. He was a private individual with a specific interest in a timely resolution. Raymond sent the formal notice of mortgage acquisition and simultaneous notice of default to Eleanor Carrington on a Monday morning. The notice indicated that the new mortgage holder was exercising the right to call the loan in full, citing the 2 missed payments and the terms of the original instrument, which contained a clause permitting exactly this under conditions of default. The full balance outstanding was detailed in clear, unambiguous figures at the bottom of the letter. Eleanor Carrington had 14 days to respond. Marcus heard about her reaction through a source he had not expected. Diana, who called him that afternoon in a state of agitation that was entirely different from her previous calls. The anger was gone. In its place was something rawer. "My mother received a legal notice about the house," Diana said. "Something about the mortgage being called. She's been trying to reach her bank and they're saying the mortgage was sold and—" She stopped. "Marcus, do you know anything about this?" "I think you should speak to your mother's attorney," Marcus said. A silence stretched between them, long enough for Diana to arrive at a thought she clearly did not want to finish. "Oh, Marcus," she said quietly. "What did you do?" "I made an investment," he said. "Have a good evening, Diana." Eleanor called an hour later. The composure that had characterized every previous communication was entirely absent. Her voice was sharp and brittle, like glass under pressure. "I don't know what game you think you're playing," she said, "but you need to understand that this family has relationships you cannot begin to comprehend. We have attorneys, and we have connections, and if you think you can walk in here with some financial maneuver and threaten—" "Eleanor," Marcus said. It was the first time in 8 years he had addressed her by her first name. "I'm not threatening anything. The mortgage is in default. The notice explains your options clearly. Raymond Cross handles all of my legal matters. His number is in the correspondence." "You absolute—" she began. "Raymond Cross," Marcus said again, pleasantly. "Have a good evening." He hung up. Preston called the following morning. This conversation was different from the previous one. The authority was gone from his voice, replaced by something that was trying very hard to sound like authority and was not quite managing it. He spent 8 minutes arguing that the mortgage call was predatory and legally challengeable, and that no court would permit this kind of targeted financial harassment of a private family. Raymond, who Marcus conferenced into the call without announcing, listened for a while and then said in his calm, measured way that the call of the mortgage was fully compliant with the instrument's terms, that the 2 missed payments constituted unambiguous default, that the 14-day notice period was generous beyond legal requirement, and that the Carrington family was welcome to retain counsel and file any challenge they believed they had grounds for, but that Raymond's assessment was that such a challenge would fail and would cost the family significant additional legal fees they did not appear to be in a position to absorb. There was a silence after Raymond spoke. "Who is that?" Preston said. "My attorney," Marcus said. Another silence. "What do you want?" Preston said. It came out smaller than he intended. Marcus was quiet for a moment. He looked at the window. The morning was clear and bright, the kind of early autumn day that feels like a gift, cool and luminous and unhurried. "Nothing from you, Preston," he said. "Nothing at all." The Carrington family, through their attorney, made 2 attempts to negotiate. The first involved an offer to resume mortgage payments and clear the arrears within 90 days, along with an unspecified proposal for a personal arrangement, which Marcus understood to mean money, though the figure was never named. The second involved a suggestion that the entire matter could be resolved through mediation, with a neutral party overseeing a payment restructuring. Raymond declined both on Marcus's behalf and communicated that the mortgage holder's position remained unchanged. On the 11th day of the 14-day notice period, Eleanor Carrington requested a meeting, not through attorneys, personally. A handwritten note delivered by courier to Hale Advisory Group, addressed to Marcus by name. He read it twice. He thought about it overnight. He told Raymond he would attend. The meeting was at the Carrington estate. Marcus drove himself and arrived on time. The house looked exactly as it always had from the outside, massive and grand and permanently assured of its own significance. Up close, the signs of neglect Raymond had noted in his research were visible if you knew to look for them. A section of iron fence with a hinge that didn't close properly. Gutters that needed work. The east wing's paintwork going soft along the trim. Eleanor met him in the formal sitting room. Preston was there, seated in a chair by the window, which surprised Marcus. He had expected Eleanor to want to manage this alone. Preston's presence meant the situation was more desperate than even the formal communications had suggested. Eleanor looked older than the last time Marcus had seen her, which had been at the final divorce mediation session, where she had attended uninvited and sat in the corridor to convey, through her presence alone, that the Carrington family was watching. Today she sat in her usual chair, upright and precisely arranged, but the quality of her stillness was different. It was not composure. It was the rigid, fragile stillness of someone holding themselves together through will alone. "Thank you for coming," she said. The words appeared to cost her something. "Of course," Marcus said. He sat across from her. "We want to resolve this matter," Eleanor said. "I think we all agree that whatever personal difficulties have arisen between you and Diana, they shouldn't extend to—" "Eleanor," Marcus said quietly, "you invited me here. If you have a proposal, I'm listening." She looked at him. In 8 years, she had never really looked at him. She had looked past him or through him, or at the space slightly to his left, as though his actual face was not quite real enough to engage with directly. She was looking at him now. "What is it that you want?" she said. Marcus placed his hands on his knees. He considered the room. He considered the years he had sat in rooms like this one, absorbing the careful architecture of the Carrington family's self-regard, the objects positioned to communicate legacy, the silence trained to communicate breeding, the hospitality engineered to communicate, always and precisely, that you were a guest here, and they were not. "I want you to understand something," he said, "before we discuss anything practical." Eleanor waited. Preston was very still by the window. "For 8 years, Marcus said, I sat at your table and I ate your food, and I listened to your opinions about my work and my background and my worth as a person. I watched you speak to your daughter about her future as if I wasn't in the room. I heard what Preston said at that Christmas party and at the other ones and at the anniversary dinner in 2019 when he told your guests that Diana had married down and everyone laughed, including Diana." He paused. "I didn't say anything. I decided that what I knew about myself was sufficient and that your assessment of me was simply wrong and that time would clarify the matter." Eleanor opened her mouth. "I'm not finished," Marcus said. She closed it. "The mortgage on this property will be called in 3 days," Marcus said. "The outstanding balance is in the notice you received. I've reviewed your family's financial position in some detail, and I know that you cannot pay that balance. This house will go through foreclosure proceedings, and given the inflated valuation in your most recent assessment, those proceedings are going to be uncomfortable." He looked at Preston. "Your fund will also be subject to scrutiny before this is over, Preston. The structural issues in the way it's capitalized are the kind of thing that regulators take an interest in once a family name appears in financial press coverage." Preston's face had gone the color of old wax. "There is an alternative," Marcus said. He turned back to Eleanor. "I will restructure the mortgage at current market rate with a 5-year term and clear payment schedule. The arrears will be folded into the principal. The estate stays in your family." He paused. In exchange, I want a formal written acknowledgement from you, Eleanor, personally, signed, notarized, and drafted by Raymond's office, so there's no ambiguity, acknowledging that the characterizations made of me over the course of my marriage to your daughter were inaccurate and harmful, and that you regret them." The room was absolutely silent. "That's all?" Eleanor said at last. Her voice had an unfamiliar quality. He realized, with something that wasn't quite satisfaction, but was adjacent to it, that it was disbelief. "That's all," Marcus said. "You're not asking for money." "I have money, Eleanor," Marcus said simply. "I've had money for quite some time. That was never the point." Preston let out a breath that was almost a laugh and was not. "You're serious," he said. You went through all of this for an apology?" "For an acknowledgement," Marcus said. "There's a difference. An apology implies the possibility of forgiveness. An acknowledgement is just the truth." He stood. "Raymond will send the restructuring terms with the form this afternoon. You have 72 hours. He walked through the formal entry and out the front door and down the stone steps and got into his car. He drove to the end of the long driveway. He sat there for a moment with the engine running, looking at the house in the rear-view mirror. Then he drove away. Eleanor Carrington signed the acknowledgement on the 3rd day, 2 hours before the deadline expired. It was a single page, drafted by Raymond with the particular careful plainness of legal language that leaves no room for interpretation. It acknowledged the conduct. It acknowledged the harm. It was notarized at 11:14 in the morning by a notary public whose stamp Marcus would later examine with the quiet attention of someone confirming that a thing is real. The mortgage was restructured that afternoon. Marcus filed the signed acknowledgement in a fireproof box in the office of Hale Advisory Group. He did not share it publicly. He did not need to. He knew it existed. Eleanor knew it existed. Raymond knew it existed. That was sufficient. Garrett Voss pleaded guilty to financial fraud 8 weeks later and received a sentence of 14 months plus restitution. The restitution order included interest and legal fees. It was a figure that would follow him for a long time. Diana moved into an apartment across the city. She was seen occasionally at the kinds of events she had always attended, though the social coverage of those events reflected in its small and precise way that her position in those rooms was no longer quite what it had been. Marcus heard about this second-hand and found that he felt nothing about it in particular. He hoped she would be all right. He genuinely did. But he no longer had any stake in her navigation of the world. Preston's investment fund came under regulatory review 4 months after the Carrington estate matter was resolved. The review confirmed 3 of the structural concerns Raymond's research had identified. Preston retained counsel and spent the better part of the following year managing the fallout, which was expensive and professionally damaging, and conducted entirely without Marcus's active participation, since he had not reported Preston to any authority and had not needed to. Certain things, once looked at closely, attracted their own scrutiny. Paul, his junior partner, turned out to be exceptionally talented at client relations in ways that Marcus had suspected, but that were now, without the distorting presence of Garrett's ego in the office, fully visible. Hale Advisory Group had a strong first year as a renamed and reconstituted entity. The second year was better. Marcus hired 3 more people and moved to a larger floor. He started a foundation in his parents' names, focused on financial literacy for young people from lower-income communities, the kind of program that might have changed the slope of certain trajectories if it had existed when he was starting out. He served on its board personally. He attended the quarterly workshops and sat in the back of the room and watched young people learn things that the world assumed they didn't need to know. His brother Daniel came to the first foundation event and stood next to Marcus at the reception afterward and said nothing for a while, just looked around at the room. "You know what I think about sometimes?" Daniel said finally. "What?" Marcus said. "That pen," Daniel said. $1 pen, man. Changed everything." Marcus smiled. "It didn't change anything," he said. "It just showed me what was already there." He met a woman named Josephine at a board meeting for a community development organization they both volunteered with. She was a structural engineer with a quiet sense of humor and a directness that Marcus found, after years of navigating the social theater of the Carrington world, almost unbearably refreshing. She asked his opinion about things and waited for the actual answer. She told him when she disagreed with him and explained why, and listened when he explained his reasoning, and sometimes changed her mind and sometimes didn't. She was interested in the foundation and suggested 3 structural improvements to its mentorship program at their second dinner together, none of which Marcus had thought of, all of which he subsequently implemented. He did not rush anything. He had learned the value of patience, and he saw no reason to abandon it now that it was serving him so well. The fireproof box that held Eleanor's acknowledgement also held, Marcus had discovered, a significant amount of available space. But he thought sometimes about what else might eventually find its way into it. Documents, milestones, a life built slowly and on solid ground. Eleanor Carrington, for her part, never publicly addressed what had transpired. She continued to attend the events she had always attended and to maintain the posture of a woman of consequence, though the estate's upkeep had visibly improved now that the mortgage was restructured and the financial hemorrhage had slowed. She did not contact Marcus again. He did not expect her to. He did not need her to. He had been told for 8 years by people who were certain they knew the measure of him that he was not enough. Not polished enough, not connected enough, not impressive enough to matter. They had said it in the small, persistent ways that people who believe in hierarchies always eventually say what they believe through inference and implication and the casual cruelty of exclusion. They had been wrong. Not because he had taken revenge on them, though the justice that had come to each of them was real and deserved, and Marcus did not pretend otherwise. They had been wrong because the measure they were using was simply not the right one. It had never been the right one. It had always been too small. He had known that for a long time. What had changed was only this. Now, so did they. True power, he had come to understand, was not in what you displayed. It was not in what you inherited or claimed or performed. It was in what you built, slowly and carefully and with your eyes open, or while the people who underestimated you were busy looking at something else. He had built something real. It would last. That was enough. That was, in the end, everything.